Well, good evening to all stations on frequency. This is the Henderson Amateur Radio Club Sunday Night TechNet. My name is Earl, WB6AMT. Tonight is introduction to APRS. Mike is currently standing by remotely. I don't know where that's at. He'll go into that, I'm sure. Mike, are you ready to take it away?
KJ7 Oscar Whiskey Delta here. Yes, Earl, thank you so much. Everybody that's listening in, I want to send a special thank you to some of the people that have kind of helped me along the way, and I'm really happy to hear Frank and 7ZEV here. And I think I did hear Yuji here, K7STI. But I am remote, and I'll fill you guys in. This is an introduction to APRS. If you guys are at home, I would advise you guys to go to Earl's website, WB6AMT.com, and look at his HARC TechNet supplements. I have about 18 slides that I'm going to go over. With these slides, it's easier for me to give some talking points, and then what I'll do is after each slide, I'll pause for a minute, and if there's any questions about this particular slide, call up. Otherwise, there'll be some time for questions at the end. My goal is to give everybody a general understanding of what APRS is, how it works, how to use it, and what it does for me. Now, as for my remote station, if you guys are at home and have the ability to go to the internet, or if you have your cell phone with you, I advise you to check out APRS.fi. It's a website. In there, it'll ask you for a call sign. In the top right corner on the web page, I can't remember where it's at when you're looking at it from a mobile device, type in my call sign. It's KJ7OWD-9. And you'll see that I'm located on the northwest side of town on top of a water retention basin, about 3,100 feet elevation. That will serve as a quick check to see some of the different things that I'm talking about and maybe help you with questions or seeing everything that's going on. Without further ado, if there's any questions before I begin or any comments, please speak out now. Otherwise, I'm going to begin with slide 1, an introduction to APRS.
87MIR. Real quick, where was that the slides at that we can look at?
Good question. Those are on Earl's website, and Earl, please correct me if I'm wrong, but it's WB6AMT.com. On the right, there's a drop-down where you can select HARC TechNet. And in there, he has a list of all the documents and all the previous TechNets he's done. From there, you'll scroll down a little bit, and you'll see the slides. Like I said, there's about 18 of them.
Yeah, they'll be under tonight's date, October 24th, 2021. The information?
I was just about to double with you. I think that's adequate time. If anybody needs any more time, please speak up. Otherwise, I'm going to begin. This is KJ7 Oscar Whiskey Delta.
KD7MIR. Did you get the information about going to WB6AMT.com and clicking on the HARC TechNet and then scrolling down to tonight's presentation there?
I did. Thank you very much, and I think I may have even found it. It looks like it's just at the very bottom. So thanks. Really appreciate it.
Okay, great. Welcome to an introduction of APRS. APRS, I'm going to start with, stands for Automatic Packet Reporting System. And this is a little introduction that I put together. There's a lot of information on the internet. All of my sources that I used on this particular document were from www.aprs.org and www.wa8lmf.net. Moving on to slide 2, we're going to get into what is APRS. What is APRS? APRS, and I'm going to read this one right off the slide, is a real-time digital packet protocol for exchanging information to a large number of stations. These are packets that are created on your radio via a TNC, and these are things that we will go into, and then transmitted real-time over a single analog frequency. APRS differs from regular packet radio in 4 ways. It can integrate on maps and other data displays to organize and display the data. It uses a one-to-many protocol to update everyone in real time. So when you make a change, everybody that's listening sees that change. It uses a generic digital repeating or digipeating system to get those packets where they need to go. And lastly, it uses an internet backbone to link everyone worldwide. But the internet is not required. KJ7 Oscar Whiskey Delta for ID and air. So moving on to slide 3. What can APRS do? APRS can do a lot of things, but most importantly, I want everybody to know, and Bob Baringa, the guy that came up with it, wants people to know that the goal of APRS is communication and local info updates, not just vehicle or person tracking. It can send and receive position reports. It can send and receive weather reports. It can send and receive messages, alerts. You can also send and receive text messages to anyone, not just somebody with a ham radio license. You can send and receive emails, and you can send and receive weather requests for and from a specific location. The best part of this is that all of it can be displayed on a map, giving you very good situational awareness of what's around you and what's going on around you. So, I forgot to pause for questions on the last slide. Do we have any basic questions on the first couple of slides that I've covered? Very good. You guys are fast learners. Moving on to slide number 4. How does it work? APRS uses packets that are compiled by your TNC within your radio or externally using a ham-created AX.25 protocol, and then is transmitted over a common frequency in all of North America, 144.390. TNCs, like I said, can be built into a radio or are a separate piece of equipment. TNC stands for Terminal Node Controller. This is what actually compiles that data and digitizes it. The TNC uses an AFSK protocol to convert that digital information into tones. AFSK stands for Automatic Frequency Shift Key. So when you listen to the frequency 144.390, or if maybe you've accidentally scrolled across it, you might have heard funny tones that sound like old dial-up internet. That's the AFSK. Lastly, the messages or the packets are transmitted on 144.390 and then repeated via a digipeater. What does this actually mean? It means your radio, equipped with a built-in TNC or a separate TNC, generates the information using that standardized protocol and transmit tones. These tones are what you hear and are repeated on the digipeaters. Any questions? There's a lot of information here, and this is why I wanted to make a slideshow presentation. Anyways, moving on. What do you need to use APRS? The answer is not much. You need a 2-meter radio, a GPS, a TNC, and an antenna. Pretty straightforward. Right now, there are a lot of options for APRS radios. Some of them include Kenwood and Yaesu. I think that they make the industry standard of APRS radios, but there's a few other options as well. They come with a built-in TNC. That's that terminal node controller that does all the digitizing. Another option is to add a TNC to your existing radio, like a MobiLink. You can see a MobiLink on the right side, lower right side of that image there. The MobiLink uses your current 2-meter radio and a phone or a tablet running an app called APRS Droid, and then it's connected to your radio, usually via some sort of input, and it does everything that a Yaesu or a Kenwood unit does. The beauty of using that MobiLink system and your phone or tablet is that you get real-time maps displayed right in front of you. With a Kenwood unit, you can get real-time maps, but it takes a collection of wires and dongles to get it to work right. You cannot get a real-time map with the Yaesu radio because the terminal node controller inside of it is software defined. I'm going to break a minute and catch my breath. This is KJ7, Oscar Whiskey Delta for ID. Well, there's a few other handhelds that have APRS capabilities, and I want to make it an important note, rather, that DPRS is not APRS. And also know that if you can only beacon out, you have a really limited capability with your APRS unit. If you have a one-way tracker, like some of the early Anytone radios that have APRS out, it's recommended that in the comment section, you include a QSY frequency or another frequency that somebody can contact you on, so that way anybody else using an APRS system can actually talk to you. There's another important note that I was asked to make by my friends at TAPR. TAPR is the Tucson Area Digital Packet Radio Club down in Tucson, Arizona. They were really excited that I was sharing this information with you guys here in Las Vegas and elsewhere where people are listening. And one of the things they mentioned that they wanted me to mention was the importance of turnaround time. Turnaround time is kind of what it sounds like. It's the time that it takes for your radio to transmit a packet, stop transmitting, and turn around and listen. For example, the radio that I'm talking to you on now is a Kenwood TMD 710G. It's kind of the Cadillac of APRS radios. It has a turnaround time reported of under 20 microseconds. If you wanted to make your own system using that MobiLink TNC and hook it up to, say, a Baofeng radio has a turnaround time of approximately 300 microseconds. This is an important note because if your radio cannot switch to from transmit to receive fast enough, a portion of a packet, yours included, could be missed when it's listening and will not be reported on your system. This is important, as you will learn, because APRS only works when you can hear 100% of the packet. Any questions on what you need for APRS?
Well, I'm currently looking at the APRS.FI on my cell phone. I'm logged in. Where was it that we enter your call sign again, please?
Grab my telephone. Are you on your mobile device? I know on the computer, if you have it in front of you on the computer, there's a spot on the right side and it says track call sign. But let me log in on my telephone and tell you where to plug it in so I can tell you exactly. Okay, so if you're on your mobile device, the search bar is down on the bottom. It's kind of small to see. It's underneath where it says Google, I imagine. It should be the same on everybody's phone. But there's a little spot that's blank where you can type in some information. Put in KJ7 Oscar Whiskey Delta, that's OWD, -9, and then hit search. And it should zero in right where I'm at.
Okay, thank you very much. WB6AMT.
Just for, gee whiz, if you change the map to satellite, you'll see that I'm on top of a hill near a water retention basin. Anyways, let me get back to my PowerPoint and I'll continue on. This is KJ7 Oscar Whiskey Delta.
Hey, BSD.
Go ahead, Nate.
I just wanted to throw one more comment in there on the dwell times. If anybody's interested in getting into APRS cheaply, you might stumble across these little, a typical audio card that would go to a 3.5 mil jack on your computer or Raspberry Pi, and then into a Baofeng, and then a lot of times you can read stuff that will say use the Vox circuit. That does not work very well at all on Baofengs, because when that Vox circuit gets triggered, instead of your dwell time being like 300 microseconds, as if it was triggered with the PTT, it's more like there's a little tail that is on the transmission, and it's like 3 to 5 seconds, which is quite a bit worse. Like that MobiLink or like a Signal Link type device will get you down to like the 300 microseconds, but beware of the cheap little $10, $15 Vox circuit cables for APRS on Baofengs. Great presentation so far, Mike, and back to Mike. Nate BSD.
Nate BSD, thank you. Yes, he brings up a very good point, and I can discuss on that further as well. But he hit the nail on the head. Using Vox for APRS is not a great idea, and it has to do with how long it takes for that packet to come out, and then how long the push-to-talk comes on. As you'll see further on, the longer that push-to-talk is depressed or transmitting, the longer you're taking up more time on the APRS frequency. We'll get into that, why that's important a little bit later. Anyways, we're going to move down to the next slide, which is titled SSIDs. So what is an SSID? Well, I used to know what that stands for, and I'm sure somebody else will chime in, but it's a way of denoting what kind of station is currently using the APRS. I keep mentioning that my station is called KJ7OWD-9. I have an iGate on the northwest side of town, and its call sign has a -10 SSID, so it reads KJ7 Oscar Whiskey Delta -10. So what's cool about these SSIDs is they're all pretty much standardized. There's 15 of them. And quickly, when I see a station come up on my radio and I see it's a -7, I'll know that's a handheld that potentially has message capability. Or I'll see -9 and I'll see that's a primary mobile, which generally speaking is message capable. Now, let's talk for a minute about those one-way trackers that I mentioned earlier. It's important that you don't use a -9 or a -7 SSID because they are not, generally speaking, message capable. Bob Baringa, when he set this up and started using SSIDs and standardizing them, he offered a -12, a -12 for one-way trackers. That way, people can see that you're moving and that you're mobile. But, sorry, I just got a message from KN6LDC. I'll cover messaging shortly. Anyways, if you do the -12, people will know that you're moving, but you're not message capable. And that's why in the comment field, it would be important to put your QSY frequency. Questions on SSIDs?
KD7MIR.
IR, go ahead, sir.
Yeah, SSID stands for Secondary Station Identification. So that's how you can differentiate that you have more than one station so that people can send traffic to you. That's left over from the old packet radio days.
MIR, thank you so much. Yes, there you go. Secondary station identification. Okay, moving down. The next slide is an important one to me. Does it require internet? No, but although APRS is local real-time information, the data can be injected into the internet through what's called an iGate. I mentioned that I have an iGate on the northwest side of town. There's another iGate on the southwest side of town, and there's another one in Henderson, and I've seen a few more kind of popping up. What is an iGate? It's an internet gateway. They allow worldwide data to come to you provided you are within an iGate. They also allow people to see that data in real time. So that data that is produced on APRS.fi or another website, APRSdirect.com, that's where you can see that information. The internet is what really makes APRS shine, in my opinion. Are you in the middle of nowhere without cell phone service? You can send a message home letting your significant other or person of interest know that you're safe. Are you curious about the weather? Ask for a weather report via WXBOT. That's WeatherBot. Want to have a QSO with a friend or family member living a few states away? Send them a message. The limitations here again, as I mentioned, are the iGate. If you can't reach an iGate can't reach you. Any questions on iGates?
So the iGate is as effective as whether you have a cell phone tower or not?
Well, yes and no. Again, APRS was a tactical two-way communication system, so the whole idea was that within 30 minutes you can kind of see a lay of the land of anybody that's transmitting a signal or receiving a signal. And then I think it was back in the late 90s and the early 2000s, people realized that you can inject that information to the internet. Now, you mentioned like having a cell phone. I can get the information from central Nevada, where there is no cell phone service, onto the internet because generally speaking, the packets are really low bandwidth, and so they travel a pretty good distance from mountaintop digi to mountaintop digi and can make it hundreds of miles to find an iGate. So, yes and no, and we will cover digis and what their range is a little more further. Does that answer your question, Oyen?
Roger.
Anybody else? You guys are giving my forearms a rest, so I don't have to push the talk when you guys ask questions. All right, KJ7 Oscar Whiskey Delta for ID. Moving down to messaging. Messaging is just like it sounds, a way to send another station a message. As I was sitting here talking about APRS, I did receive a message, and I'll go ahead and read that to you. N6LD LDC sent me a message, and his message says, I love APRS. I love APRS as well. So, with the advent of iGates, messaging is no longer limited to line of sight. When you compose a message, it's sent from your radio, and then is bounced off the digi until it hits an iGate. Your iGate then reaches the internet. Provided your recipient was heard by another iGate anywhere in the world within a certain time, about 30 minutes, their nearest iGate will generate a message via RF and send it back out to them. The most important point for an APRS message system to work is that both stations have been heard by a local iGate. So this is why two-way iGates are imperative to this system. I got into ham radio because of APRS. About a year and a half ago, I was building out my truck, and a lot of you know that I'm very proud of my truck, and I do a lot of camping in my truck in very remote locations. And I heard a buddy talking about how he has a radio that does APRS, and he can send a message to and from his wife who was living in Phoenix. This blew my mind. Then I realized at the time the only two-way iGate that Las Vegas had was K7STI-10. Yuji was the only person that had one. So I went about trying to rectify this, and luckily there's been a few other people, a few other iGates that have popped up. I'm going to pause for air and give a little more detail on exactly how messaging works.
W7HEN, repeater.
WV6AMT.
WV6AMT, go ahead.
Okay, is an iGate a different piece of equipment, or is it just explain how someone could put an iGate in?
Absolutely, that's a great question. An iGate is still a two-way radio with TNC, if you will, or some sort of machine that can decode those digital packets. So my system includes an antenna, quite obviously, a single monoband 2-meter radio that has a data port in the back, and this data port is connected via a sound card, USB sound card, into a Raspberry Pi. My Raspberry Pi does all of the decoding and transmitting whenever it receives a message and there is a request for a message. So you can use your standalone unit like a Kenwood unit or a Yaesu unit, but it has to be connected to the internet somehow. Does that answer your question?
That's got me going in the right direction. Now, the Raspberry Pi is going to be your internet, obviously your internet connection. Is there a script that or a piece of software that you need to use specifically to make it an iGate, or is that something that you're going to cover a little farther down the road?
Well, that's building an iGate is a topic for another TechNet, but briefly there is a program or a script, if you will, and I would invite Yuji or Frank or even Nate to comment on that, because I am definitely a Raspberry Pi newbie, but I have a piece of software on there that I load up from the terminal, and it's called Direwolf. And Direwolf, once you get it configured, will do just about anything that you ask it. So some of you guys that have APRS radios might have noticed recently that H2 is being broadcasted with its frequency and tone and shift via APRS, and that was all done through the software Direwolf on the Raspberry Pi.
Okay, thank you. WV6AMT.
Good question. It's a great question, in fact, and I've had a few people, RFN in particular, ask me about building iGates and doing a TechNet on building iGates. I am definitely not an expert on that. I've done it one time, but I could probably come up with something. I'm going to pause for air and then, like I said, come back with exactly how the messaging sequence works when it's going from RF to the internet.
PSD.
Go ahead, Nate.
Yeah, just to add in one little bit about iGates is that there's kind of two flavors of them. There's ones that are receive only, and it's really common that folks will use like a cheap RTL SDR and a Raspberry Pi to run a receive only iGate. But then what you're talking about is kind of a full duplex, with a transmitting system. So if, folks are looking that up online, be aware that there's receive-only ones and then, full functioning transmit and receive iGates. Back to net control, NAB, BSD.
Very good. I know I can always count on you, Nate. Thank you so much. So, messaging, by the way, this is KJ7 Oscar Whiskey Delta. How does messaging work from RF to the internet back to RF? Well, first, there's an originating station, and it formats an APRS message for an intended recipient. I'm going to use Frank as an example. So I'm sitting in my truck. I'll put in his call sign, N7ZEV-9, if he's in his mobile unit. I'll put the message, and I'll transmit it. And iGate will hear the message, it will decode it, verify the checksum, and then inject it into the APRS. Hopefully, or then the next point is, the whole world will hear that message, including a few local iGates that are near to him. Hopefully that iGate that is near to him recently heard N7ZEV and will generate an RF message and send it to him. His machine will then receive the message and send back an acknowledgement. There is no handshaking, though. If the packet gets broadcasted out and he is not heard, he won't hear it. Or let me rephrase that. If the packet is broadcasted out and he doesn't hear all of it, he won't receive the message, is what I'm trying to say. It's imperative that an iGate local to him heard the message, or rather heard him, so that way he can hear the message. So, in summation, I send a message, it gets heard by an iGate, it gets verified, it gets sent via the internet to all of the iGates in the world. An iGate near him has heard him recently, it will generate the message and send it to him, and then there will be an acknowledgement. So that's how messaging works from RF to the internet back to RF. Any questions on that? Okay, let's move on to the next important part of this whole operation. What is a digipeater? A digipeater, or a digi, is a digital repeater that repeats the packets. And unlike a traditional voice repeater, like we're talking on now, it uses the same frequency that it receives the packet on to send back out. So there's no negative split, and there's no tones or anything. A digi receives the packet, inspects it, injects a little bit of data, and then just a few moments later sends it back out. It's important to understand this. Each packet that the digi hears is decoded, has some data injected back into it, and then is sent back out. The number of hops, which is the number of times a packet is repeated, is dependent on what you as the user selects as a paradigm. That will be covered shortly. In the slide there, again, I can't thank you enough, N7ZEV, for listening in, is a picture of a mountaintop digi. This is a digi that's on the northwest side of town that has excellent range and excellent characteristics. All right, needed a little breath there. By using a digi, you're taking up half the channel capacity for each hop your packet makes. The use of more digi means less and less channel capacity. This is why it's imperative that you select the right paradigm based on your needs. We are going to go into paradigms next because they are very important after we cover a little more on digis. Do we have any questions on the basic concept of what a digi does? Very good. Moving on, some important notes. Digipeating is critical in APRS versus conventional packet radio. This is because APRS uses a one-to-many broadcast nature. Signals have to be perfect, and I mean perfect, for a digi to repeat a packet. See the note on the right. I'll go ahead and read this because I really want to drive this home, and it was written so well by WA8LMF that it warrants being reread. The kind of marginal, noisy, scratchy, not completely hard-quieted signals so many people inflict on voice repeaters with underpower handhelds just won't work on data transmission. A pop, A momentary burst of white noise, flutter, or multipath-induced phase distortion that you don't even notice on voice will be fatal to a packet transmission. Quick pause for air. Digi does not have any sort of handshaking. There's no acknowledged or no acknowledged coding that comes through like in traditional packet radio. So if an APRS signal has some imperfections, it will not be repeated on a digipeater. Because most signals coming from a moving station are coming from a moving station, there has to be enough excess signal that a 20 decibel drop in the signal will remain noiseless. This means, given an antenna and transmitter power, it will only produce about 1/2 to 1/3 of the reliable range on an APRS packet that it would produce on FM voice. That's right. A packet, generally speaking, won't go as far as traditional voice. But fear not, digis are here to send the packets out farther. Another problem that you might run into is packet collision. Remember that most digis are situated on a mountaintop, just like N7ZEV-3. He also has one on Potosi, and then he has another one over there by Mesquite. So just remember that they're on mountaintops, and because there might not be any traffic on your side of the mountain sending a packet, doesn't mean that there is not traffic on the other side of the mountain. What will happen is called packet collision. Packet collision is when two packets make it to the digi at the same time, and there's a small chance, if they happen to happen at the same time, that neither of them will be repeated. As an area gets congested, this can be a real problem. KJ7 Oscar Whiskey Delta for ID. Any questions on that? Okay, understanding paths or the paradigm. On the website there, you'll see a picture of the slide, and then I think either above it or below it, there's a little animation. And this little animation is showing a mobile user that has his radio set up as a wide 11, wide 22 station. What does that actually mean? That means that his packet will be broadcasted from his vehicle and hit a fill-in digipeater, which is something that you'll find in town. Or sometimes iGates also act as fill-in digipeaters. So an iGate can not only inject the packet to the internet, but it can also send out a signal trying to get or rebroadcast your packet, trying to get it to a mountaintop digi where it can extend the range. Once it leaves that fill-in station, the wide 11 paradigm is dropped and it becomes a wide 22. That means it'll hit the high-level wide coverage digipeater. That high-level wide coverage digipeater will repeat it, and it will hit all the other digipeters around it and then be broadcasted again. That's that hops I'm talking about. So the first hop hits the fill-in. From the fill-in, it goes to the high level. From there, it gets broadcasted out to all the other surrounding iGates and then is heard again. This is very difficult to understand, and that's why I think this graphic really shows you what's going on. Now, I want to note, please do not run around town using a wide 11, wide 22 paradigm. Let's move on to the next slide, understanding paths, and then we'll cover the paradigm questions. So, what are the paradigms? They have all been, and I will warn you guys, when you go search for this and you go to aprs.org, Baringa gives a gigantic explanation on the history of the paths and how they came to be, and it's just ad nauseum. You'll read and read and read and read until you get to the part that says, the new paradigm. This is the new paradigm in a nutshell. You use a wide path setting. You have wide 11, which means your station will transmit a packet. It will be heard by a digi and be repeated one time. That's it, no more. The next one is wide 11, wide 21. This produces two hops. That means your mountaintop digi will hear your packet, repeat it. It will be heard by another mountaintop digi and repeat it again. Like in the last slide, the other option is wide 11, wide 22. That's that three hops that I was talking about. In there's a recommendation for most mobile operators to run wide 11, wide 2-1 settings. I disagree. I think driving around town a wide 1-1 paradigm is the best path for you. Why is that? You won't congest the network with extra beacons being repeated that have already been heard by a local digi. The biggest problem I have with our network here in Las Vegas is we get a ton of signals from San Diego, from Los Angeles, from Anaheim. If I'm on the south side of town and somebody in HRO down in Southern California has messed with their little APRS radio and changed the wide path setting, I generally get a beacon letting me know that HRO is in Southern California. Why do I need to know that? I know where HRO is. It would be useful if I was in California trying to find it, but not in Las Vegas. And the reason that's happening is because they've changed the path setting to the wrong paradigm. Pause for error, and then I'm going to talk about baud rate. Well, let me take this one step further. Why do I recommend that 1-1 setting? Remember or know that APRS uses a 1200 baud rate. So here's a little theoretical exercise. Assuming an APRS position packet, just telling everybody where you are is only 50 bytes. And you add in the AX25 data and the overheads, the total size of your packet is going to be 696 bits. The packet takes about 1 second to transmit. If the packet is using the paradigm of wide 11, wide 22, which generates 3 hops, it will take 3 seconds to transmit all of those hops. That means with 20 stations sending packets at the same time, the max capacity of the entire system is 60 seconds. And then no more data will be able to make it to a digi. Sorry, I had to catch my breath there. So, by using a wide 1-1 setting around town, you're using less of that limited 1200 baud for our congested network. Does anybody have, and I'm sure I'll get a few, questions about the paths and the new paradigm?
Yeah, 7-8 here.
There was 2 at once. I heard suffix A and B, I think.
TD7MIR.
Go ahead, MIR.
All right, I thought I would give one little bit of understanding with the wide 11, wide 21, or wide 22. The first wide 11, if everything is set up right, only a fill-in digipeater will respond to that. Theoretically, if I'm by your house, your IG will hear my station and it'll retransmit it, or hopefully it can hit a big mountaintop digi and then go out again. If you have a big mountaintop digi, it kind of automatically X's out that first wide 11 and then uses up the second half of the path. So if I was wide 11, wide 22, it would ignore the first wide 11, then it would beacon out the wide 22, and it would change it to wide 21. Wide 11 is only supposed to be used by fill-in digipeaters.
So that wide 11 that he's talking about and fill-in digipeaters are digipeaters that usually are located in metro areas that are trying to get your signal to a mountaintop digi. When you're in remote areas, you can have wide 11, wide 22. So if you're out by Tonopah and you have the wide 11, wide 22, which should generate 3 hops, you won't actually get 3 hops out of it because there are no fill-in digipeaters, generally speaking, in the middle of nowhere. So what happens is when that mountaintop station hears your packet for the first time, it will drop the wide 11 and will automatically only give 2 hops. The main point that I really want to drive home here is that if you're running around town and not going anywhere, just use a wide 11 1-hop system. If you're going out of town, let's say you're going from here to St. George or here to California, start with a wide 11, wide 21, which will give you 2 hops, and see where that gets you. If you're going way out remote, then start thinking about 3 hops. The next slide should be a picture of the LA Basin, and this is going to circle back to that whole 1200 baud limitation. I took that snapshot when I was building this, and it was very serendipitous. There happened to be 17 RF stations that were moving at that very time. So because no system is 100% efficient, theoretically, this network could have been at 100% capacity if everybody was using the wrong path settings, if they had too many hops going on. Remember, when Bob Baringa set up APRS, he set it up as a real-time, tactical, two-way digital communication system where he could get a globalized snapshot of all traffic in a 30-minute span. So you don't need to be sending packets every minute. The idea is if you're in a fixed position, maybe once every 30 minutes. If you're changing directions, maybe a little more frequently. Again, Tapper asked me to make note of this, and it's pretty interesting, and if you really want to pursue this, talk to me further. But there are some APRS systems, some communities that are doing APRS on 70 centimeters. The benefit of doing it on 70 centimeters is that the baud rate is 9,600. So you get quite the gain there. You can add quite a bit more traffic. When I listened in on their digital presentation, there's even some talk about stations that are going to use 70 centimeters just for digipeating, and then the stations that are moving around will keep using 2 meters to send their packets. There's some really exciting stuff going on with this, but I just wanted to give you a snapshot of how a system could be overloaded, and luckily for me, there happened to be 17 stations at one time broadcasting in LA. Imagine that. So, moving down, I have some tips for success. That little graphic is kind of neat because that shows all of the APRS activity that's going on in the U.S., parts of Canada, and Mexico. Remember, all of North America operates on the same frequency, and that's 144.390. So some tips. Make sure your system has a good antenna to increase your potential for success. Ensure you have a good path setting for your locale. If you're going to be in a remote area, maybe use that wide 11, wide 22 setting. If you're just going to be roaming around town, maybe just use a wide 1 setting. Heck, if you want to be a real rebel, maybe go wide 0, which means you'll just broadcast out and an iGate will hear you, potentially, and broadcast to you where you're at. It will also allow any traffic that's in direct RF of you hear where you're at. The last thing I recommend is checking out www.aprs.fi or aprsdirect.com. I like APRS Direct a little bit better. The way it displays the data is pretty neat, but when I'm trying to dig into what's actually being transmitted and looking at decoding actual packets, I find myself on aprs.fi. They're both great websites. So that is kind of the beginning of introduction that I have here. The next few slides are on some really cool things that I wanted to show you that APRS can do. Before I move on to those, do I have any questions about the introduction of APRS? You guys are too nice to me. Moving down, let's talk about some cool GWES stuff. I have a slide entitled SMS GTE, and there should be a video on there as well. And so what is SMS GTE? It's a way to send a text message from your radio to anybody that has a cell phone and is capable of getting an SMS message. The way it works, in the to field on your APRS-enabled radio, you type in SMS GTE. That's Sierra Mike Sierra Golf Tango Echo. In the message body, you use the @ sign, put a phone number in, and then put in your message. And very quickly, you'll get an acknowledgement from SMS GTE letting you know that your message was received and sent to the person that was receiving it. It's really cool. If you click play on the video, you can see my radio transmitting a message to UG. Now, this only works if you're within range of an iGate. So, I have to remind you again, if you're in the middle of central Nevada, let's say you're near Warm Springs, Nevada, which is about halfway between Tonopah and Ely, you can use SMS GTE, and there's a very good chance that your signal will make it out. but you might not get a response. When the recipient gets a text message, it comes from I think a 201 area code. It will say your call sign and then whatever that message is. And then the recipient, all they have to do is type a message back on their phone and hit send. That message gets injected into the APRS Internet, IS, and finds an iGate that heard you last. That iGate, just like regular messaging, will send an RF packet to you, so that way you get it on your radio. I'm telling you guys, this is really, really slick. AJ7 Oscar Whiskey Delta, any questions about SMS GTE? You guys are going easy on me. Okay, the next slide is WXBot. I will have a video of how WXBot works, but it works very similar to SMS GTE. It allows you to obtain a weather report for your current location, because remember, APRS requires a GPS signal, or any place that you want a weather report, excuse me. So what you do is in the to field, you type in WXBOT. That's Whiskey X-Ray Bravo Oscar Tango. And then in the message field, you can put in a where, when, and what. So if you leave it blank, it'll send you weather for your current location. You can put in a buddy's call sign, and it'll tell you what the weather is based on where their address is on QRZ. You can put in a city or state, or lastly, you can put in a 4-letter ICAO airport code, such as KLAS or PHNL for Honolulu. You can ask when, so you can say today, tomorrow, tonight, or you can even put in the day. You can say Las Vegas, Nevada, Tuesday, and it'll tell you what the weather is going to be. Lastly, you have an option of what kind of briefing to get. If you don't put anything in there, it will give you a briefing, and quite literally, it'll tell you the temperature, if there's any warnings, and what the winds are like. Otherwise, you can ask for a more in-depth weather report by putting in current, or for you aviation nerds, much like myself, you can put in METAR, and that'll give you everything from wind speed and direction, temperature, dew point, and altimeter settings, cloud coverage. You get the point. That's WXBot. Any questions about WeatherBot? Okay, moving on to the next slide. I have a picture of a mountaintop digi, and it's showing its range, and this is really cool. And again, Frank, if you're still here, thank you so much for making this work and setting this up at Angel Peak. This is a snapshot of N7 ZEV-3, which is a mountaintop digi that he has. It shows the approximate range, that's that purplish circle that kind of goes around there, where N7 ZEV should hear you. Now, the red stuff is where it hears a lot of packets. So you can see most of the city is heard quite a bit. And then the lightish purplish to bluish dots are places where it has heard direct RF. Now, we've had a lot of crazy propagation going on, and that's why you can hear direct stations from Ely all the way on the north side of the map, and Tonopah kind of all the way on the northwest side of the map. But this should give you an idea of how far your packet can go once it hits N7ZEV-3's mountaintop digi. Any questions? All right, well, that comes to the conclusion of my APRS introduction. And again, I tried to make this an introduction. I could spend a lot of time talking to you guys about APRS. I want to remind you that I am still a relatively new ham. I've spent all of my time learning how to become an amateur radio operator because of APRS, but I'm still a student here. So I rely heavily on N8BSD for understanding how things like AFSK works, and I rely heavily on UGK7STI for understanding how to set up an iGate. I've spoke a few times with Frank, N7ZEV, on understanding how a digi works. I couldn't give this presentation without everybody in the ham radio community's help, so thank you for that. Without further ado, let's break out questions.
WB6AMT.
Go ahead, Earl, KJ7 Oscar Whiskey Delta.
So I could essentially set set up an eye gate here at my house, which would be in the north Las Vegas, to help matters out, even though I don't have APRS set up in my car, correct?
Oh, absolutely, and I meant to mention this and look it up, and I will look it up while we're chatting here as soon as I let go of the push to talk, but generally speaking, my iGate hears anywhere from 10,000 to 20,000 packets a month. That's right, 20,000 packets. So think of that as congestion. As soon as an iGate hears those packets, it automatically puts them onto the internet, which helps relieve some of those stations. Like I said, some of those stations in California, kind of like in Mojave, they don't have internet near them, so they really are relying on stations like K7STI-10 to get their packets onto the internet. That's useful because those stations that are kind of in the middle of nowhere, that don't have access to the internet, people will know as they're driving, they can get on APRS.fi or APRSdirect.com and see, all right, I'm going to plan a trip to LA. Where are the digis? Well, you wouldn't know those digis were there if it wasn't for iGate. So absolutely, even if you're not an APRS user, setting up an iGate will definitely help the system. And even better if you can make sure that it's a duplex system, a send and receive system.
Okay, well, that sounds like my next project. Thank you very much, WB6AMT.
7ZEV.
7ZEV, please, go ahead, take the floor.
Two things, Mike. One on the messaging, the Kenwood 700 radio, which is manufacturer discontinued and is hard to find. But if you can find one, and not only is it APRS capable, but a keyboard plugs into it. And it makes this whole messaging procedure much more user-friendly. And second point is your presentation was extremely well done. Thank you.
Thank you, Frank. That means a lot coming from you. Yes, I guess I should have mentioned, with most of the current offerings of radios, Yaesu and Kenwood, and some of the HTs, messaging is difficult. If I send you a message right now from my Kenwood unit, I have to do T9 texting. Now, most of you ham radio guys have been around about as long as I have, some maybe a few years longer. You guys know what T9 texting is. But I asked my neighbor kid if he knows what T9 texting is, and he looks at me like I'm crazy. So I use my DTMF mic to type out the letters. So if I need the letter C, I have to hit the number 2 3 times to get the letter C. So yes, that is a really nice feature. I know that on that FTM 400 unit, there is a digital displayed keyboard and it's touchscreen. I hear that's a little bit better.
It is to a point. You can still fat finger it when you drive. KJ7 NAS.
Not another spouse. We don't text and drive, though, right? That does bring up another random point. You can set up your radio to automatically send a reply if you are driving. Because GPS is required, my radio knows that when I'm driving over, say, whatever I set it up to, I don't remember, 30 miles an hour. If you send me a message, you'll get an automatic reply, and mine was user inputted. It says, well received, ! 73. And so if you see that, and it comes almost immediately after you send me a message, please note I'm not trying to be short with you. I probably just have my hands on the steering wheel. Any other questions before I kind of close up and we move to what I think the guys call the after party? All right, KJ7 Oscar Whiskey Delta. Listen, guys, I'm very excited that you guys gave me this opportunity to speak on this, and I will talk your ear off about it. I mentioned it before, I'll mention it again. I got into ham radio because of APRS. I have been in the middle of nowhere, and when I say nowhere, I mean nowhere, and sent messages to my wife to let her know that I was doing fine. Last October, I was sitting at about 12,000 feet on Black Bear Pass and just outside of Ouray, Colorado, and I was getting packets sent to Albuquerque, New Mexico, reliably, and let my wife know that I was having a wonderful time hiking with my family, my uncle and my cousin. So it's pretty powerful, and it's much, much more than just position reporting. If you just have a one-way radio that can only send out beacons and can't receive messages, that's okay. That's a good start. But please add a QSY frequency, so that way when I'm driving around and I see your beacon pop up, I can quickly tune to your frequency and say hello. Again, I really appreciate this, Earl, for giving me this opportunity. This is something that I really enjoy, and I hope to spark some more interest in the rest of the people that are listening on the net. This is KJ7 Oscar Whiskey Delta saying thank you.
Hey, Mike, I've got one question here. I don't know if maybe if I missed this earlier, but you mentioned that you could send a message to your wife. Now, in doing that, does the message get, how does she get that message? Does it come as an email, or is she a licensed ham and has an APRS radio there at the house, or how does she get that message?
Question. No, you do not have to be a licensed ham to receive the message, and you do not have to be a licensed ham to reply to the message. The way it works is through that SMS GTE slide. So if you scroll back up, it's probably about slide 15 or 14 or so. In the to field, you type in SMS GTE, and then in the message body, you put in the person's phone number, and then it's just like when you send me a text message or I send you a text message. You put in the person's phone number, and then you type the message that you want. Now, there is some limitations. The limitations are, I think, 126 characters. I don't remember if it'll break it up into two messages if you send more than 126 characters, but it goes directly to their telephone. Now, email is also another option. I haven't used the email function because I think you have to have like a WinLink login or something, and it seemed more trouble than it was worth, and wasn't nearly as easy as just sending a text message, an SMS message. So like I said, you type in your radio that's APRS capable in the to field. Normally that's where you put somebody's call sign, like KJ7OWD-9, that's where you'd put mine. Instead, you'd put SMS GTE, and then in the actual message body, you use the @ sign and put in the person that you'd like to receive their phone number. And then you type out your message, and then you hit send. And it goes right to their phone. How does that work? I don't know. You'll have to check their website. They do give an explanation, and I read it at one point, but I've been focused on kind of getting this together. It's gone. It's somewhere in the cobwebs. But like I said, all they have to do to reply to you is reply back to that text message, and it goes right to your radio.
In other words, she's going to get a text message. So that tells me what I needed to know. Thank you very much. WB6AMT.
Question, please.
Go ahead. It sounded like John.
Roger, Mike. So if an unlicensed person, you sent me a message, the SMS gate is what that is, and I get it on my phone, and I send you a message back, that's going to go through the internet and back through a digi repeater that is transmitted over the ham airwaves to your radio. Is that correct?
Okay, so you send that message, and it goes to the APRS internet, and it goes to all of the iGates. And any iGate that has heard me recently will generate an RF packet. That RF packet, depending on how the iGate is set up, and this is again in the nuts and bolts, but will send that message via RF, and it could potentially hit a digipeater and be digipeated far off into the middle of nowhere. So let's say I'm in Beatty, and I'm trying to send you a text message, or rather you're trying to send me a text message like you said. My iGate will generate that via RF, and it will be transmitted, and it'll hit Frank's mountaintop digi at Angel Peak, and then from there it'll be transmitted again way out into the distances, like you saw on that graphic kind of showing what his range is, and I will hear it that way. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, it does, because I was just following up what Earl said, because he said unlicensed ham going over airway. So I just kind of wanted to clear how that worked, and actually that's pretty cool that it's jumping all those hops.
There's been some questions on the legality of that, and I think the reason it's legal is because SMS GTE is a ham-based organization, and they're the ones that are actually dealing with all that messaging. I will circle back to this, but just know that anything that you type out is public, just like ham radio. Anybody can listen in and see what we're saying. So maybe not say something like send nudes to your wife via SMS GTE, because anybody will be able to see that. But anyways, circling back, because they're handling that and it's being broadcasted via a licensed ham iGate, I think that's how they're able to kind of, I don't want to say circumvent the legality of a non-ham sending an RF message, but that's kind of what's happening.
Okay, Roger. I was just curious. I am familiar with SMS Gate. I use it on DMR because you do the same thing. I aggregate my wife all the time. So very good. Thank you.
J87MIR.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, on that topic of unlicensed operators, that's kind of the big reason why some iGates aren't a two-way iGate or a full duplex iGate. If you're doing a two-way iGate like that, you're taking responsibility for whatever somebody is texting back out. And some people don't want that responsibility, and that's why they don't have theirs set up to transmit stuff that comes from the internet. So that's one concern to think about if you ever do set up a two-way iGate is, heaven forbid something happen, the people the FCC is going to come after whoever put that out on the air. And so, if you texted, send nudes and that came out of your iGate, then you're on the hook for that. So that's kind of the one reason why some people don't put two-way iGates up.
Comment.
Yeah, that's a very good point, and something to think about if you are interested in setting up a two-way iGate. Go ahead, station with the comment. This is KJ7 Oscar Whiskey Delta.
Just a correction on the two-way iGate. The AX25 protocol requires a call sign in it, so there's no way it's not open to the public. N7CEP.
Right, Frank. No, you're right about that. But I guess my point, or rather, what I'm saying is that anybody in the public can go to APRS.FI, happen to click on your station and look at your packets and see that you send nudes or whatever inappropriate thing that you want to send, because it is publicly visible for anybody when you look at the raw packet data. That's kind of where I was going with that.
And concur, absolutely correct. Visible data. However, data coming back through a two-way iGate is controlled.
See, very good, and thank you for that. That's good to know.
Question?
With a question, go ahead.
Yeah, W6MW. So for the last gentleman, then does it somehow screen for obscenities, or could a non-ham send an obscenity-laced text back to you?
So I'm pulling up their website as I'm here. I do know that they have some shortcuts, and you're going to have to go to their website to look at their shortcuts. But let's say some random person gets your call sign and decides to send you these obscenity-laced text messages, as you said. First of all, they have to know the number for SMS GTE to work, and the only way you can get that number is if you have used the system previously. So the way I was able to get to the system, and this is kind of their verification method, is you send via your APRS radio a text message to yourself, and then you get that message and that phone number. Now, I shared that phone number with my wife, and now she has it, and she knows that when she gets a phone number, and like I said, I think it's a 210 area code or 201, whenever she gets a message from that number, she knows, oh, look, this is my crazy husband with this KJ7 Oscar or OWD call sign. Now, there's some filters, too. So let's say somebody random gets the number and starts bombing you or spamming you with obscenities. You can go in there, and I think it says APRS kill or something. So you send it to SMS GTE, and then it knows that person's spamming you, and it'll block it. Now, listen, I'm shooting from the hip here. I'll pull this up as we discuss this further, but I don't know exactly how else to stop that spam from coming other than using these filters.
W7HEN.
Okay, thank you. W6MW.
I will make one more comment about shortcuts. The raw packets can be decoded, and anybody can see the phone number that's being used. So some of the shortcuts that are kind of cool are you can set it up as like wife, and you have to do that through their website. You go onto their website and you say, this phone number, 555-1234 equals wife, and then you type in wife and your message, and it knows because of the database that they store that that's your wife. And then when somebody looks at the raw packet and they click on your raw packet, it'll just say, wife, I'm home safe, 73, or whatever the case may be. Okay, well, any other questions? Well, guys, again, I can't thank you enough. Thanks for giving me this opportunity. If anybody has an APRS radio, and I have received a few already, and they want to send me a message, please do. I'll be here beaconing for, probably another 20 or 30 minutes, and then I'm going to head home. I really appreciate this opportunity, and hopefully will spark your guys' interest to offer more discussions later.
All right, well, thank you, Mike. Excellent presentation. Typically, when we get a TechNet that goes to 9:30, that's been an interesting, very provocative topic. And you've got me interested in wanting to put in an iGate to benefit the system, even though I don't have any immediate plans to get APRS on my vehicle. WB6AMT, anyone else got any questions or comments concerning tonight's TechNet? Call that control now.
KJ7RNB.
Red Blues, go ahead.
Well, Mike, I just want to thank you for an absolutely excellent presentation. And I also want to thank you for being the one that introduced me to the Henderson Amateur Radio Club. You in the right direction, and I've benefited since then. So thanks and thanks. 7-3, KJ7RNB.
Blushing over here, Rhythm and Blues.
Everyone have a great evening. Thank you for participating tonight in our TechNet. Stay safe. 73, WB6AMT.